The lights of the San Francisco Tech Gala shimmered against the sleek glass walls, reflecting in the polished black marble floors like shards of a fractured city skyline. Sanya Kapoor adjusted the strap of her designer dress, her pulse quickening as she scanned the crowd. The air was thick with ambition and champagne, a mingling of power suits, brilliant minds, and the faint whiff of success. She had spent years climbing the corporate ladder in Silicon Valley, but tonight, it wasn't a job pitch or a coding break through that set her nerves alight. It was curiosity, and perhaps a little thrill, that something extraordinary was about to happen. That's when she saw him. Arjun Mehta leaned against the grand staircase, tall, impeccably dressed, with a magnetic confidence that drew her eyes despite the dozens of other luminaries. His dark hair was slicked back, his tailored suit flawless, but it was his smile, self-assured, slightly crooked, a little dangerous, that made her stomach flutter. She felt, inexplicably, that he already knew something about her, some secret she hadn't yet shared with herself. Their introduction was effortless, almost cinematic. A mutual acquaintance had mentioned her work on an AI project that had recently caught the attention of major investors. Arjun's interest was immediate, genuine, and flattering. "Your algorithms are impressive," he said, his voice low, resonant, "but I have a feeling there's more to you than code." Sanya laughed nervously, a little off balance. She was usually confident, analytical, always measured. But under Arjun's gaze, she felt exposed, scrutinized in the way a high-resolution camera captures every micro-expression. Conversation flowed, laughter danced across champagne flutes, and within hours, a connection had been forged that felt almost inevitable, like two lines finally intersecting after years of parallel existence. Weeks passed in a whirlwind of dinner dates at hidden bistros, late night drives along the Golden Gate, and quiet hours spent watching the city lights flicker from his penthouse. Sanya marveled at the life Arjun led: vast wealth, international connections, a relentless drive for success. And yet, there were moments that made her pause, furtive glances at his phone, hushed late night calls, the occasional shadow crossing his expression when he thought no one was watching. She tried to ignore it. She told herself it was the price of being with someone so influential, someone so enigmatic. Then came the wedding, a spectacle of opulence. White roses cascaded down crystal staircases. Strings of golden lights shimmered over the ballroom, and a string quartet played music so delicate it made the air itself feel precious. Friends and colleagues whispered about how quickly their love had grown, how improbable yet perfectly suited they seemed. Sanya's chest swelled with happiness as she watched Arjun promise her the world in a tone both tender and commanding. Cameras flashed, but she hardly noticed. Her entire focus was on him. That night, in their honeymoon suite overlooking the twinkling skyline, Sanya felt an unfamiliar chill brush her shoulder. Arjun was elsewhere, speaking softly on the phone, pacing the floor. She tried to focus on the warmth of the bed, the velvet curtains, the heady scent of roses and expensive cologne, but a knot of unease had formed in her stomach. He returned to the bed, smiling, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. "Everything okay?" she asked. He kissed her forehead, whispering a vague reassurance. "Just work, nothing more." Sanya nodded, though she couldn't shake the feeling that there were secrets hidden behind his perfectly composed exterior. Secrets that perhaps even he didn't fully understand, or worse, secrets meant to stay hidden. As she drifted to sleep, her phone buzzed on the nightstand, and the screen displayed a notification unlike any she had seen before, an encrypted message. Hesitant, she tapped to open it. The words burned into her mind instantly. Some truths can't stay buried. Her heart thudded violently. She glanced at Arjun, who was now lying beside her, serene and oblivious, or pretending to be. Sanya's fingers trembled, and the room seemed colder, shadows longer, the city lights outside suddenly ominous. That night, beneath the facade of luxury and love, she realized that nothing about her new life would be as simple or as safe as it appeared. The morning sun filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Arjun's mansion, painting the polished hardwood floors with warm streaks of gold. Sanya wandered from room to room, marveling at the scale of her new life. Every corner of the house was filled with cutting, cutting-edge technology, voice-activated lights, automated climate control, a kitchen that practically cooked itself. The furniture was sleek, imported, almost cold in its perfection, and yet Sanya felt a thrill living amid such luxury. This was the dream she had worked for, the life she had imagined while coding late into the night in her small apartment downtown. And yet, the thrill was tempered by unease. Arjun's presence, once magnetic, now carried shadows. He would vanish for hours, sometimes into the city, sometimes to undisclosed destinations. Phone calls that started with whispered tones ended abruptly whenever she entered the room. She noticed subtle gestures, a twitch of his hand, a glance at her that seemed to measure her more than it measured her love. Sanya tried to rationalize it. He was a busy man, a successful entrepreneur. Secrecy was part of the game. Even so, there were things that could not be ignored. Financial statements arrived that made little sense. Large, unexplained transfers to offshore accounts. Repeated purchases that had no apparent purpose. Sanya asked about them once, tentatively, and Arjun's smile was quick, almost practiced, as he waved her concern away. "Just investments," he said, "trust me." And she did, at least she tried. Friends and acquaintances noticed too. Over candle-lit dinners at trendy downtown restaurants, they whispered hints of caution. "He's brilliant, but there's something off," one friend said, voice low enough to be overheard only by Sanya. Another suggested subtle patterns, sudden business trips, the hurried disappearance of key assistants, the frequent deletion of messages. Sanya dismissed it all. How could she not? She loved him fiercely, and in love, some blind spots were inevitable. Days bled into nights, and the mansion, once so inviting, began to feel like a gilded cage. Sanya walked through hallways lined with abstract art and minimalist sculptures, the echoes of her own footsteps haunting her. There were times she would peek at Arjun's study, catching him hunched over a laptop, a phone pressed to his ear, and a shadow of something unspoken in his eyes. He never noticed her watching, or perhaps he did, and she simply refused to see. The unease grew stronger one evening as Sanya lingered in the study, pretending to sort through files while her curiosity gnawed at her. Arjun had left the room briefly, muttering something about an urgent meeting. Sanya's eyes scanned the bookshelves, the sleek desk, and then a faint glint behind a false panel caught her attention. Kneeling, she found a small hidden drawer. The latch was delicate, almost invisible, but it gave way easily under her touch. Inside, she discovered a stack of unsigned checks, crisp and ready, each made out to names she didn't recognize. Alongside them lay a small ledger, its pages filled with cryptic codes, numbers that didn't add up, sequences that seemed deliberate, yet meaningless at first glance. She flipped through it, her pulse quickening. The patterns suggested money moving like blood through hidden veins of a complex, secret system. Was it legal, or something darker? Sanya felt a shiver crawl up her spine. Questions she hadn't dared to ask now pressed forward. What was Arjun hiding? Who was receiving these funds? And why had he gone to such lengths to conceal them in a drawer she would have never noticed? For the first time, she felt the weight of isolation in the mansion's grand, echoing halls. Her perfect life, with its glittering parties and high-tech comforts, suddenly felt like a veneer over something deeply unsettling. She replaced the checks and ledger exactly as she found them, her fingers trembling. The room seemed to grow colder, shadows stretching unnaturally as if aware of her discovery. When Arjun returned, smiling, oblivious to her internal turmoil, Sanya forced herself to laugh softly, to ask how his meeting had gone. But even as he spoke, she couldn't shake the feeling that a line had been crossed, a threshold from which there was no returning. Something in the mansion was not what it seemed, and deep down, she knew her life with Arjun, her perfect life, was about to unravel in ways she could not yet imagine. The mansion was eerily silent when the police arrived. The golden morning light that usually bathed the halls in warmth now seemed harsh, unforgiving, highlighting every shadow, every polished surface, reflecting the chaos within. Sanya had called the authorities herself, her voice trembling, almost detached, recounting that she had found Arjun lying motionless in his study. But as the officers moved through the rooms, the subtle disturbances told a story she hadn't intended to reveal. The study, once immaculate, was now a scene of subtle violence. A chair was toppled, the edge of the mahogany desk bore a scratch, and papers lay scattered, some soaked with an unfamiliar stain. On the desk, Arjun's laptop sat open, its screen frozen on lines of encrypted code that blinked mockingly, as if daring anyone to decipher the secrets within. Surrounding the laptop were high-tech devices, smart home hubs, security monitors, and digital assistants, all silent witnesses to the night's events. It was as though the mansion itself had conspired to hide the truth. Detective Rajiv Sharma, tall, wiry, and methodical, took in the scene with a measured gaze. He had seen death in more straightforward circumstances, but this was different. Something about the arrangement of objects, the pattern of displacement, and the way the scene had been touched yet subtly left intact screamed planning. He crouched near the laptop, his gloved fingers hovering over the keyboard. Encrypted messages, he muttered under his breath, scrolling through lines of code left by Arjun in a frenzy of last-minute communications, blackmail, threats. Someone knew exactly what they were doing. Sanya watched silently from the doorway, her mind racing faster than her pulse. She felt both detached and acutely aware, as though observing herself from outside her body. Questions swirled. Had she missed signs? Could she have done something to prevent this? The investigator's eyes lingered on her too long at times, subtle glances that made her stomach knot. Her composure, though outwardly steady, betrayed tiny cracks. A flicker of hesitation when asked about Arjun's recent behavior. A delayed reaction to their questions about visitors or unusual activity. Paramedics had confirmed death, natural causes ruled out, no immediate signs of struggle with another person. Yet Detective Sharma noted faint scuff marks on the floor and a broken vase near the doorway, indicating some disturbance. The entry points were intact, no signs of forced locks, but the security cameras had been disabled in the early hours of the morning. Someone had been in the house, or someone had planned this meticulously. As other officers combed through the mansion, looking for physical evidence, Sharma continued to sift through digital traces. Emails, messages, and encrypted notes revealed a tangled web of threats. One line in particular stood out: "If you don't comply, everything collapses. Don't think anyone is watching." The words pulsed on the screen, a silent accusation. Arjun had been careful, meticulous, but someone had been even more careful, leaving just enough to unsettle and warn. Sanya's phone buzzed intermittently. She had left it in the bedroom, but now noticed messages she hadn't seen before. Unknown numbers, partial images, cryptic text that seemed connected to Arjun's hidden transactions. Her mind raced. Was this related to the ledger she had found weeks ago? Had Arjun's wealth made him a target, or had his secrets drawn someone close into danger? The more she pondered, the more she realized she didn't fully know the man she had married, not even in the few months they had shared. Sharma's partner, Detective Ellen Hughes, whispered something to him as they examined the scene. No forced entry, yet clearly someone's been here and she's too calm, or too aware. Sharma's brow furrowed. Sanya, catching part of the exchange, felt a chill. Was she being considered more than a witness? Shadows stretched unnaturally across the mansion as officers bagged evidence, photographing the subtle disturbances that could easily be dismissed by an untrained eye. A single fingerprint on a glass, a trace of dirt on the desk edge, a faint smudge on a doorknob. Each small detail added layers to the mystery, hints that the perfect life Sanya had imagined was riddled with danger and duplicity. Hours later, as forensic teams packed up, Sharma leaned toward Hughes, his voice a low rasp of certainty, meant only for her ears. "This isn't just a murder. Someone wanted him gone, and they planned it meticulously." Sanya's eyes followed them as they spoke, the weight of the words pressing against her chest. She felt the first real tremor of fear, not just for herself, but for the life she thought she had known. Someone had invaded their world, had manipulated events with precision, and left her standing in the wreckage, uncertain if the next move would be hers, or theirs. The mansion, once glittering with promise, now felt like a labyrinth of shadows and hidden dangers, every corridor and room holding potential secrets that could change everything. And deep down, Sanya knew her journey had just begun. That what she had uncovered in the ledger and her life with Arjun would collide with a darker reality she was only beginning to glimpse. The investigation into Arjun Mehta's life revealed complexities that even seasoned detectives found unnerving. Detective Rajiv Sharma sat in front of a wall of computer screens at the police digital forensics unit, scrolling through bank statements, transaction histories, and encrypted emails. Offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands, wire transfers to untraceable shell companies, and sudden withdrawals with no apparent purpose painted a picture of a man whose wealth had layers as deep and intricate as the codes he developed for his tech ventures. "Look at this," Sharma said, pointing at a screen. Hundreds of thousands had moved across accounts in the middle of the night, and these transfers, they're too regular to be random. Detective Ellen Hughes frowned, leaning over his shoulder. Could it be corporate maneuvering? Arjun had a lot of enemies in Silicon Valley. Rival startups, investors who lost millions. Sharma nodded, but the deeper they dug, the murkier the waters became. It wasn't just business rivals. Patterns emerged that suggested someone had been leveraging Arjun's wealth and his secrets for personal gain. Hidden debts, investments in obscure cryptocurrencies, and coded emails hinted at a clandestine network of threats and manipulation. Whoever had access to these accounts could have orchestrated far more than financial ruin. They could have dictated the course of his life and death. Meanwhile, Sanya's own messages were scrutinized. Her phone revealed late night texts and deleted emails, innocuous at first glance but layered with subtext. Some spoke of her own quiet dissatisfaction, moments when she had doubted Arjun. Others suggested discussions with unknown contacts. Cryptic, brief, carefully erased. Investigators couldn't tell if she had knowledge of his dealings, complicity, or just a naive curiosity that put her in the wrong place at the wrong time. Sanya herself felt the walls closing in. The mansion, once a haven of opulence, now felt suffocating under the weight of suspicion. She had loved Arjun fiercely, yet fragments of his personality, furtive glances, tense phone calls, sudden disappearances, replayed in her mind. Emotional manipulation became clearer in retrospect. The charm, the reassurance, the constant oscillation between intimacy and distance that left her questioning her own judgment. As forensic teams combed through Arjun's personal spaces, they discovered evidence of hidden affairs. Hotel receipts, emails disguised as work correspondence, and intimate messages painted a story of a man leading multiple lives. There was betrayal in the digital footprints, mirrored in the ledger Sanya had found weeks before, suggesting that Arjun's financial maneuvers were not just about wealth. They were about control, secrets, and power. Outside the mansion, colleagues, friends, and even rivals were interviewed. Each added another layer to the puzzle. A heated dispute over a startup acquisition, whispered rumors of blackmail, subtle hints that Arjun's brilliance had earned him enemies not only in the market, but among people he had trusted. Every thread pulled revealed more connections, more hidden motives, more reasons someone might have wanted him silenced. Sanya, for her part, became increasingly aware that she herself was a point of interest. Her proximity to Arjun, her knowledge of his habits, her curiosity about his financial discrepancies, each could be interpreted as motive, opportunity, or complicity. She began to replay her interactions with him, her own decisions, her small acts of deception. The thrill and certainty she had once felt in their whirlwind romance now soured into anxiety. Was she an observer of his demise, or had she been entangled in it without realizing? Amid this labyrinth of digital evidence, one discovery stood out. In a hidden corner of the mansion, a forensic analyst unearthed a thumb drive tucked beneath the false bottom of a drawer, an artifact almost too deliberate to be accidental. The drive contained a video, heavily edited to obscure the identity of one participant, showing Arjun in a heated argument with someone whose gestures, voice, and presence conveyed urgency and menace. The conversation was fragmented, punctuated by threats and veiled warnings. The unknown person accused Arjun of betrayal, financial misconduct, or perhaps something far more personal. The analyst paused the video, eyes narrowing. Someone went to great lengths to mask this person. They murmured, But the tension, it's palpable. Whoever this is, they were there to intimidate, or worse. Sharma leaned back, rubbing his temples. This changes everything. It confirms that Arjun's death wasn't random. Someone was angry, someone had leverage, and someone clearly had a reason to ensure he stayed silent. Sanya felt the weight of the discovery too. She watched the investigators exchange glances, a silent acknowledgement of the dark, intricate world. Her husband had been part of a world she barely understood, and a world that had now drawn her into its shadows. As the evening light dimmed, the mansion seemed less a home and more a repository of secrets, each room holding fragments of truth, each digital footprint a potential key to understanding the deadly end of Arjun Mehta. And in the quiet, the hidden motives whispered relentlessly. Someone wanted Arjun gone, and someone had engineered the perfect storm to see it through. Detective Rajiv Sharma reviewed the timeline of Arjun Mehta's last days, each moment reconstructed from emails, digital footprints, and eyewitness accounts. Patterns emerge: late night visits, unexplained meetings, and interactions with individuals previously unknown to the police. The more he pieced together, the clearer it became that Arjun's life had been a tangle of secrecy, temptation, and subtle manipulation, where trust was a currency and betrayal a lurking shadow. Interviews with colleagues at Arjun's tech firm revealed tensions that were easy to overlook in his public persona. Some employees whispered of a romantic liaison between Arjun and a junior executive, someone who seemed devoted to him but whose motives were murky. They were always together, one assistant admitted, but I never saw it as serious until I realized how much it affected his focus on work. Others insisted they had seen Arjun exchanging cryptic notes with another business partner, a trail of subtle coercion and pressure that suggested blackmail. Financial statements seemed to support this: payments labeled ambiguously, withdrawals timed suspiciously, deposits routed through multiple accounts. Meanwhile, neighbors described odd occurrences: cars arriving in the dead of night, unfamiliar faces appearing at the gates, lights flickering in rooms that should have been empty. One neighbor, a retired professor, recounted seeing Arjun speaking heatedly on his balcony with a shadowy figure who vanished into the night. Another mentioned a woman entering the mansion late, only to leave moments later, her presence seemingly unnoticed by Arjun himself. Sanya, though cooperative, found herself under an increasing microscope. Detectives noted her hesitations, the careful way she phrased answers, and small inconsistencies between her accounts and electronic evidence. Had she noticed the late night arrivals? Had she seen Arjun meeting with anyone in secret? Her previous discoveries, the ledger, the encrypted messages, her own deleted texts cast shadows over her reliability. Even as she answered truthfully, her mind replayed moments that could now appear incriminating, painting her as either naive or complicit. The mansion itself revealed subtle clues. Investigators cataloged fingerprints, traces of fabric, and smudges on surfaces where no one should have left them. Every room, every digital device, seemed to hold fragments of a story that refused to be simple. Emails suggested emotional manipulation. Phone logs hinted at secret rendezvous. And the thumb drive recovered earlier contained a confrontation whose tension was almost palpable. The unknown figure's identity still obscured. Sharma began to notice a pattern emerging from the chaos. Arjun's life was a web in which personal, professional, and illicit threads were tightly interwoven. The affair suggested passion and betrayal. The financial maneuvers hinted at coercion and control. And the shadowy communications implied someone had leverage over him, enough to pressure or threaten. Piecing these threads together, the detectives saw the contours of a carefully orchestrated network of deceit. One afternoon, a friend of Arjun's confided something unexpected. He was afraid, she said, lowering her voice. I don't know of what exactly, but he kept mentioning that someone knew too much, that someone might ruin everything if he didn't play along. He was nervous, paranoid even. He didn't trust anyone, not even Sanya. The revelation hit Sanya with a sickening weight. She had trusted him blindly, had assumed her presence alone kept him grounded. Yet Arjun had been guarding secrets from her, just as she had kept secrets from him. The emotional manipulation that had been subtle in the early days now appeared blatant in retrospect. The charm, the reassurance, the occasional coldness. It was all part of a pattern that had left her questioning her own judgment. As night fell over the mansion, the digital devices flickered under the forensic team's scrutiny. Security footage was being reconstructed, phone metadata analyzed, and encrypted messages decoded. The detectives were close to building a detailed map of Arjun's final interactions when an unexpected lead arrived. A single anonymous tip was emailed to the investigation team, the sender refusing to reveal identity but leaving a precise instruction. Check the security cams from the garage. She wasn't alone that night. Sharma and Hughes exchanged a sharp glance. The message implied what they had suspected but could not yet prove. Someone else had been in the mansion during the crucial hours before Arjun's death. Someone who had walked unnoticed, or at least unaccounted for, and whose presence could shift suspicion in an entirely new direction. Sanya felt her chest tighten. The words carried a weight she couldn't ignore, and even as she tried to compose herself, a cold realization settled in. The world she had thought she knew, the perfect life she had stepped into months ago, was now a labyrinth of shadows, where every secret, every hidden encounter, might hold the key to a death that was anything but accidental. Detectives began focusing on the garage footage immediately, hoping to find the figure whose presence could explain the anomalies and provide the first real breakthrough in the case. Yet even as they worked, the mansion seemed to close in around Sanya, the walls whispering of betrayals, hidden desires, and a danger that had been lurking in plain sight all along. The courthouse loomed over the city like a fortress, its stone columns bathed in early morning light that did little to soften the weight inside. Sanya Kapoor walked through the grand entrance with her attorney at her side, each step echoing in the cavernous lobby. The press swarmed outside, cameras flashing intermittently, but inside, the atmosphere was heavy with anticipation and judgment. For the first time, her private grief, fear, and uncertainty would be scrutinized under the cold gaze of the law. The preliminary questioning had been relentless. Detectives Sharma and Hughes had gone over every detail of the mansion, every moment of Arjun's last days, and every piece of digital and financial evidence. Sanya's responses had been measured, sometimes hesitant, always careful, but the investigators had noted the micro-expressions, the slight hesitations that could suggest guilt, or simply human anxiety under immense pressure. Now, as the trial began, prosecutors wasted no time presenting their case. The courtroom buzzed as digital evidence was projected on screens for all to see. Emails between Arjun and unknown contacts, call logs revealing frequent late night communications, and bank transfers to obscure accounts painted a picture of a life filled with secrets and potential motives for murder. Each piece of evidence was accompanied by expert testimony. Financial analysts explained complex transaction patterns. Forensic specialists detailed metadata extracted from Arjun's devices, and digital investigators demonstrated the encrypted messages recovered from his laptop and the thumb drive. The prosecution's strategy was clear: to show that Arjun's death was not a random tragedy, but a carefully orchestrated act, the culmination of threats, blackmail, and hidden agendas. The audience could feel the tension in the room rise with each revelation. Even Sanya's attorney, usually calm and composed, seemed momentarily unsettled as the scope of Arjun's clandestine dealings became apparent. The defense countered with equal vigor. They highlighted the gaps in the investigation: no direct fingerprints linking Sanya to the crime, no clear motive proving she had intended harm, and ambiguous evidence that could point to multiple actors. They suggested the possibility of accidental death, pointing to Arjun's rigorous work schedule, stress, induced health issues, and the chaotic layout of the mansion on the night of his death. We cannot convict someone on circumstantial evidence alone. Sanya's attorney emphasized, his voice firm but controlled. There is no proof she was involved in any plan to harm him. Yet the prosecution was relentless. They questioned Sanya repeatedly, delving into the ledger, her deleted messages, and her awareness of Arjun's financial maneuverings. Each answer she gave was scrutinized, interpreted through the lens of motive, opportunity, and psychological manipulation. For the first time, Sanya felt the isolation that had haunted her in the mansion manifest in the courtroom. Every glance, every note, every whisper felt like it carried judgment. Witnesses took the stand one by one. Friends, neighbors, and colleagues described Arjun's late night habits, secretive meetings, and behavioral changes in the months leading up to his death. The narrative that emerged was one of tension, fear, and manipulation, but it was fragmented, contradictory, and incomplete, a web of facts and assumptions that both complicated and intensified the trial. The courtroom's atmosphere shifted when the first major piece of physical evidence was presented: security footage from the mansion's exterior cameras. While most of the cameras had been disabled in the early hours of the morning, some footage remained. Detectives walked the jury through timestamps, showing entries and exits, cars arriving and leaving, and figures moving in and out of sight. Yet one anomaly stood out: a shadowy figure captured on the driveway, indistinct but present, leaving the mansion just hours before Arjun's death. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Sanya felt her stomach tighten. She had not seen the figure, nor had she been aware of anyone else entering or leaving that night. The prosecution emphasized the importance of the footage, framing it as a critical clue that the true perpetrator may have been someone outside the immediate circle, someone no one had accounted for until now. The defense scrambled to question the footage's reliability, arguing poor resolution, potential glitches, and lack of identification. Yet the seed of doubt had already been planted. If someone else had been there, could Sanya truly have been implicated? Or was she being framed by the unseen hand of a third party, someone who had manipulated both the mansion and the investigation from behind the scenes? The tension in the courtroom was almost tangible as the witness who had spotted the figure took the stand. Their description was vague yet unsettling: a silhouette moving quickly, face obscured, posture familiar in a way that suggested intent. It was too deliberate to be accidental, the witness said. They weren't just passing by. They were leaving something behind, or making sure someone didn't notice. Sanya's pulse quickened. Every memory of the mansion, the subtle disturbances, the hidden ledgers, the encrypted messages, flashed through her mind. She realized that the walls of her former home were layered not just with wealth and luxury, but with secrets, manipulations, and hidden players who may have engineered her life alongside Arjun's. As the courtroom proceedings paused for the day, murmurs filled the room. Detectives exchanged quiet glances. The new revelation the figure caught on camera meant the investigation was far from over. Someone else had been there that night, unseen, unaccounted for, and potentially responsible for the tragedy that had destroyed both a life and a marriage. Sanya sat in her chair, a chill creeping up her spine. She felt the weight of uncertainty pressing down, heavier than the polished oak of the courtroom benches, heavier than the eyes of the jury. The trial had just begun, but already the shadows of that night threatened to unravel everything. The courtroom had grown tense with anticipation, every whispered exchange between lawyers and investigators punctuating the heavy air. Outside, the city moved on, unaware of the secrets unraveling within its most elite halls. Inside, Sanya Kapoor sat rigidly, her hands folded in her lap, aware that the next few hours could redefine everything she thought she knew about Arjun and herself. The prosecution began introducing new witnesses, people whose connections to Arjun's sprawling tech empire had remained obscured until now. A former CFO stepped forward, pale and hesitant, and revealed financial irregularities he had long ignored out of fear or loyalty. I wasn't aware of everything he was involved in," the man admitted, his voice quivering, "but I know now there were payments, transfers, arrangements I shouldn't have overlooked." Sharma watched intently, taking notes. Each confession wove a tighter web around Arjun's dealings. Investments in volatile startups, wire transfers to accounts in distant countries, and payments that seemed to have no legal justification. All suggested that Arjun's empire was built not just on innovation, but on a complex network of favors, coercion, and secrets. The more the witnesses spoke, the more it became clear that someone could have exploited these vulnerabilities, manipulating events toward Arjun's demise. Then came a surprising revelation. A senior engineer, known for loyalty to Arjun, confessed that he had been coerced into deleting communications at Arjun's request. He said it was for protection, for both of us, the engineer said, wringing his hands. I didn't know the extent, I didn't know that it could lead to this. He hesitated, glancing at Sanya with a mixture of pity and fear. The room fell silent, everyone aware that this small act of deletion had inadvertently concealed vital pieces of evidence, potentially rewriting the narrative of the case. Sanya felt her chest tighten, a cold realization settling over her. In trying to love and trust Arjun, she had overlooked signs, rationalized his behavior, and perhaps unintentionally become complicit. Had it been love, or had ambition and greed clouded her judgment? The lines blurred in the courtroom's harsh light. She recalled the ledger, the encrypted messages, the late-night disappearances, and wondered if she had truly been a partner in life, or merely a participant in Arjun's carefully orchestrated game. As the trial progressed, digital forensic experts were called to present findings from Arjun's devices. The recovery of deleted emails and messages sent shivers through everyone present. Conversations that had been erased revealed disputes over money, threats from unknown sources, and hints at secret alliances that even the most loyal employees had been unaware of. One message in particular caught Sanya's attention, a cryptic line about trust, loyalty, and consequences, its implications chilling and personal. Detective Hughes leaned toward Sharma quietly. Some of these messages, they suggest she wasn't involved directly, but she was certainly close enough to be affected. Someone wanted to make sure she felt the weight of Arjun's secrets. Sharma nodded grimly, recognizing the subtlety of manipulation in Arjun's final communications. It wasn't just the money, it was the psychological control, the careful crafting of fear and loyalty that had reached even Sanya. The court took a brief recess, but the tension lingered. Sanya stepped out into the hall, her thoughts spinning. Was she innocent? Was she simply a pawn? Or had she been drawn into Arjun's labyrinth of deceit willingly? Every glance from the press, every whispered conversation from lawyers passing by, made her question not only her actions, but her understanding of the man she had loved. When the trial resumed, forensic investigators presented a breakthrough that made everyone lean forward. From Arjun's phone, recovered using advanced digital extraction techniques, they had retrieved a deleted voicemail. The voice was distorted, modulated to obscure identity, but the tone was unmistakably menacing. "You'll regret trusting her," it whispered, a phrase so intimate and threatening that even the court fell silent. The implications were immediate. Someone had been monitoring Arjun, or perhaps communicating with him under duress, and had specifically referenced Sanya in a way that suggested awareness of her role, real or perceived, in his life. The statement raised questions about motive, timing, and the extent to which Arjun had been manipulated, or had manipulated others himself. Sanya's attorney rose quickly, objecting to the admissibility of the voicemail, but the judge allowed it as circumstantial evidence. The courtroom buzzed with speculation: who had recorded the message, who had intended to unsettle or warn Arjun, and by extension, Sanya. Every answer seemed to create more questions, unraveling the threads of trust and certainty that had once defined her life. As she sat back, Sanya felt a wave of vertigo, the realization sinking in that the world she had entered with love and hope was now layered with deceit, manipulation, and hidden enemies. Every revelation from employees, friends, and digital traces painted a life in which nothing could be taken at face value. Even Arjun himself, whose charisma had seemed so absolute, had been enmeshed in a dangerous game that had now consumed him completely. Detective Sharma exchanged a look with Hughes, understanding that this new evidence could pivot the investigation entirely. The identity of the distorted voice, once uncovered, might illuminate alliances, betrayals, and motives that were previously invisible. The pieces were shifting, and the stakes were higher than ever. Sanya, caught between relief, fear, and disbelief, realized she was at the heart of a storm she barely understood. Her love, her loyalty, her choices, all of it would now be dissected, judged, and weighed in the balance of law and perception. And as the court adjourned for the day, the recovered voicemail hung over her like a shadow, an ominous reminder that in Arjun Mehta's life, and now in hers, trust could be deadly. The courtroom was tense, the air thick with anticipation and the scent of polished wood and ink. Every eye was fixed on the proceedings, but none more so than Sanya Kapoor's, whose hands trembled slightly as she adjusted the notes on her lap. This was the moment the trial had been building toward, the point where years of evidence, investigation, and secrets would be revealed piece by piece, like shards of a dark mosaic, finally arranged into a coherent, if disturbing, picture. Prosecutors rose first, their tone steady, deliberate, almost surgical. They began to recount the events leading to Arjun Mehta's death, integrating forensic, financial, and digital evidence into a narrative that was both methodical and chilling. Slides illuminated the courtroom walls, security footage, timestamps, and fingerprints meticulously cataloged, emails and encrypted messages revealing threats and coercion, and the complex web of offshore accounts and unusual wire transfers that painted Arjun's empire as one built not only on innovation but manipulation, secrecy, and hidden alliances. Each piece of evidence was accompanied by expert testimony. Forensic analysts explained subtle marks of struggle in the mansion, small disturbances that suggested someone had been in the house with intent. Digital forensics experts demonstrated recovered deleted messages, revealing hidden communications that implicated unknown figures in Arjun's final days. Financial analysts detailed unusual flows of money, linking payments to unidentified entities, emphasizing patterns of control, influence, and potential blackmail. The prosecution painted a picture of a life enmeshed in danger. Arjun, brilliant yet vulnerable, surrounded by people whose motives were complex and sometimes predatory. His empire both his creation and his prison. Every revelation chipped away at the idea of a simple, accidental death, replacing it with a narrative of orchestration, intention, and lethal consequence. Sanya's own testimony followed. She spoke with careful precision, recounting her experiences, her observations of Arjun's late night calls, sudden disappearances, and moments of tension that she had initially dismissed. She described the ledger, the encrypted messages, and her growing unease as she tried to reconcile her love for him with the shadows she had begun to perceive. Her words were measured, her emotions restrained but palpable, giving the jury insight into the human side of the story. A woman caught in the crossfire of wealth, secrecy, and psychological manipulation. As Sanya testified, small details she had once considered private became pivotal. She explained the subtle inconsistencies in Arjun's behavior, the charm that often masked manipulation, and her internal conflict as she grappled with her knowledge of financial discrepancies. The courtroom watched as she acknowledged the ledger and the thumb drive, carefully explaining what she had discovered without speculating on intent. Her honesty, tempered by caution, lending credibility to her perspective while leaving open the larger questions of motive and complicity. The defense countered by emphasizing the ambiguity of the evidence. They questioned the reliability of deleted messages, highlighted gaps in the security footage, and suggested alternative explanations for financial anomalies. They portrayed Arjun's death as a tragedy of circumstance, arguing that his rigorous schedule, stress, and the chaotic environment of the mansion could have contributed to an unforeseen accident. Witnesses who had confessed to financial misconduct were portrayed as opportunistic, their statements framed as self-serving, casting doubt on the prosecution's narrative. Yet despite the defense's efforts, the courtroom could not ignore the cumulative weight of the revelations. Hidden affairs, secretive alliances, blackmail schemes, and psychological manipulation, when viewed together, created a lattice of motive and opportunity that seemed difficult to dismiss. Every expert opinion, every recovered message, every carefully documented transaction added to the sense that Arjun's death was not random, that forces both seen and unseen had converged in a way that would ultimately determine the course of the trial. As the day progressed, tension rose. Lawyers on both sides leaned on cross-examination to emphasize contradictions, challenge credibility, and test the limits of human memory. Witnesses were asked to reconcile conflicting statements. Forensic evidence was scrutinized, and digital reconstructions were replayed for the jury to parse the minutiae of Arjun's final hours. The psychological pressure was immense, and Sanya felt the weight of every gaze, every judgment, every unspoken question that lingered in the room. By late afternoon, the courtroom had reached a crescendo. Prosecutors summarized their case with precision, highlighting the deliberate orchestration of threats, the hidden motives intertwined with Arjun's personal and professional life, and the undeniable patterns revealed through digital and forensic investigation. The defense delivered their closing argument with equal intensity, emphasizing doubt, alternative explanations, and the complexities of human behavior under stress. Finally, the judge addressed the jury, reminding them to weigh evidence carefully, consider witness credibility, and deliberate with impartiality. Then the courtroom doors closed behind them, leaving Sanya in a tense silence broken only by the quiet hum of the air conditioning and the faint shuffle of papers. She sat back, her face a mask of mixed emotions: relief that the testimony was over, fear of the unknown verdict, and anticipation of the decision that would determine the outcome of her life and the memory of the man she had loved. Outside the jury room, the case hung in balance, each detail, each confession, and each digital trace waiting to tip the scales toward truth or uncertainty. The shadows of Arjun Mehta's world, the hidden motives, secret affairs, financial manipulations, and psychological games, had been laid bare, but the ultimate judgment remained just out of reach. And as the camera panned over Sanya's face, her eyes reflecting the storm of emotions within, the courtroom seemed to hold its breath, poised on the edge of revelation. The courtroom was suffused with a tension so thick it felt almost tangible. Every person present seemed to hold their breath, eyes fixed on the judge as he prepared to deliver the verdict. Sanya Kapoor sat with her hands clasped, knuckles white, every muscle taut as though bracing for impact. Months of fear, investigation, testimony, and uncertainty had led to this moment, the final judgment in a case that had shocked Silicon Valley and captivated the public imagination. The jury filed in, their footsteps echoing against the polished floor, each movement deliberate and measured. Sanya felt her stomach tighten as the foreperson stood to deliver their decision. The foreperson's voice, calm but firm, carried across the room like a hammer striking stone. "We, the jury, find." Time seemed to stretch, each word slower than the last. Sanya's pulse thrummed in her ears. Memories flashed unbidden. The opulence of the mansion, the whispering shadows in hallways, the hidden ledger, the encrypted messages, and the thumb drive that had revealed threats and manipulation. She remembered the love she had felt for Arjun, tangled with the doubts and fears that had grown as she uncovered layers of his secretive life. That the death of Arjun Mehta was caused by actions of a third party and not by the defendant. We find Sanya Kapoor not guilty on all counts. The courtroom seemed to exhale collectively. Relief and disbelief washed over Sanya in equal measure. Tears pricked her eyes as she realized she was free, that the legal battle that had consumed her life was over. But the victory was bitter, heavy with the weight of what had been lost. Arjun's life, her marriage, and the sense of security she had once taken for granted were gone, replaced by an understanding that some truths, some betrayals, could never be fully reconciled. Reporters flooded the hallways outside the courtroom, microphones thrust forward, cameras flashing relentlessly. Silicon Valley buzzed with shockwaves from the verdict. A tale of a brilliant entrepreneur ensnared in deceit, an innocent spouse caught in a labyrinth of secrets, and a death that had exposed the perilous intersections of love, ambition, and manipulation. Articles and headlines dissected every detail, from offshore accounts to deleted voicemails, painting a picture of a world that was both glamorous and deadly. Sanya stepped out into the crisp afternoon, her face shielded from the flashing cameras by oversized sunglasses. The streets were a blur of reporters, curious onlookers, and the distant hum of the city. Yet she felt removed from it all, as if moving through a dream. Her attorney offered quiet reassurance, but words felt hollow against the magnitude of what had transpired. She had survived scrutiny, interrogation, and the courtroom's relentless gaze. Yet the experience had left an indelible mark on her psyche. In the quiet moments that followed, Sanya reflected on the life that had brought her here. She thought of Arjun's charisma, the whirlwind romance that had captivated her, and the shadows that had lurked beneath the glamour. She remembered the ledger with its cryptic codes, the deleted messages that hinted at threats, and the thumb drive that had revealed the invisible hand guiding much of his final days. Each memory was a fragment, a piece of a dark mosaic she could never fully assemble, yet one that shaped the person she had become. The fallout extended far beyond her personal life. Arjun's business empire, once considered untouchable, reeled under scrutiny. Investors demanded accountability, employees whispered of betrayal, and competitors seized the opportunity to capitalize on the uncertainty. Legal analysts debated the implications of hidden financial maneuvers, while Silicon Valley insiders speculated on the unseen pressures and alliances that had dictated the course of events. The case became a cautionary tale, a reminder that brilliance and ambition could be undermined by secrecy, manipulation, and the vulnerabilities of trust. Despite the legal closure, Sanya felt no sense of complete peace. Her reflection in the courthouse window showed a woman changed, tempered by experience, but haunted by unanswered questions, who had orchestrated the threats, who had left the cryptic voicemails, and, most unnervingly, were their forces still at play, watching, waiting, ensuring that the shadows of the past were not yet finished with her. As she walked toward her car, the sun low in the sky, a vibration in her pocket startled her. Sanya pulled out her phone. The screen lit up with a message from an unknown number. "It's not over." Her breath caught, and a cold shiver ran down her spine. She glanced around, the bustling city suddenly feeling alien and unsafe. Every passing pedestrian, every car that hissed past, seemed fraught with potential danger. The words were simple, yet carried an undeniable weight, an ominous reminder that the battle she thought had ended might only have entered a new phase. Sanya slid the phone into her bag, forcing herself to take a deep breath. She had survived the courtroom, had weathered the media storm, and had emerged legally unscathed, but the uncertainty lingered like a shadow at her heels. The life she once knew, the marriage, the love, the illusions of safety, was gone. In its place was a reality tempered by secrets, deception, and the stark awareness that the truth often arrived in fragments, leaving behind as much fear as understanding. As she turned the corner, disappearing from view of the courthouse steps, the city around her felt both familiar and alien. She realized that survival was no longer merely about avoiding scrutiny or danger. It was about navigating a world where trust was fragile, motives were hidden, and the past had a way of resurfacing when least expected. And somewhere in the shadows of the life Arjun had built, in the unknown corners of Silicon Valley and beyond, the forces that had manipulated events still lingered, leaving her with a single, undeniable certainty. The story was far from over.